Our podcast is called Rowan On. Each time we have a guest, it will be a specific topic.
Science is for everyone, and science can make everyone's lives better. Is to contextualize our lives in both space and field season. We started prospecting. I found the femur of Dreadnoughtus.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Rowan On. I'm your host, Karen Holloway, and today I'm here at the Edelman Fossil Park Museum of Rowan University, and I have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Kenneth Lacovara. Dr. Kenneth Lacovara, you have had an incredible career. You are an explorer, a paleontologist, a geologist, an author, an expert in extinction. You've done a TED Talk. You're a founding dean of School of Earth and Environment. You're the executive director of the Edelman Fossil Park Museum of Rowan University. Science can get pretty heavy for a general audience. I really like that you have made science accessible, and you seem to have a passion to share the knowledge that you have with a wide and curious audience. Why is that important to you?
Well, we're not trying to keep this stuff a secret, right? Science is for everyone, and science can make everyone's lives better, and it has made everyone's lives better. And I think really the key to communicating science to a wide audience is really empathy, right? You have to put yourself in their position, imagine what their mindset is, imagine what they might know. Whether it's a 4-year-old or a 65-year-old truck driver, imagine what their life is like and what their experience have been. And then you have to frame the information in a way that resonates with their life experience. It's the same as in when you're an author, right? You get the privilege of literally being in someone's head, and what a perch that is for you to be able to whisper thoughts directly into their head. I think of it as just an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing tool to help people understand science and to help them fall in love with the world.
Well, since you mentioned writing and being an author, the other side of that is that as a reader, you get to be in the author's head a bit, which is a gift.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your book right here? Why
Sure.
Dinosaurs Matter?
Yeah, Why Dinosaurs Matter. I wrote that as kind of an extension of the TED Talk that I gave in 2016. So think of it as the album version. I don't know if young people resonate with that or not. My audience, I was thinking for the NPR listener that would never normally buy a book about dinosaurs. So you do not have to be a dinosaur aficionado to enjoy this book. And what I really try to do in the book is a lot of the same things that we now try to do in the museum, which is to contextualize our lives in both space and time. When you understand the great arc of deep time, you realize that we occupy just a vanishingly small little sliver of it. We have a film that plays when you first enter the galleries here called Our Place in Time. The metaphor is a 1,000-page book with the Earth beginning on page 1, 4.5 billion years ago. Well, we don't even get dinosaurs until about page 850.
Wow.
And our species, Homo sapiens, appears at the beginning of the last line of the book. And our entire roughly 10,000-year civilization, that's the last 5-letter word of the book.
That's incredible.
And so when you think about Our Place in Time, well, it's almost nothing. If I gave you a 1,000-page book and said, just read the last word and tell me what the story's about, you wouldn't have a very good idea, would you? And so that's why we study the deep past. It was Winston Churchill who said the further back you look, the further ahead you can see. So if you really want to understand this wondrous planet that we live on, you can't just study the written historical record. You have to go back into deep time because that's where the data are. And so that's what I try to do in this book, is to contextualize our lives in space and time and to build that awe and wonder about the natural world, which all, I think, leads to gratitude. Not hubris, because we're a chance happenstance. We're a chance occurrence here on this world. And you run that movie back and you play it over and over and over again, and it never turns out the same way twice. And we just happen to be in the film that turned out this way, that has us.
Yeah.
And and now what are we doing with our great good fortune? That's the question,
Yes.
right? And what kind of world do we want to leave for our posterity? That's the question.
Okay. Tell me, what were you like as a child? Can you recall a moment when you wanted to be a scientist? Were you a Boy Scout, or did you dream of becoming an explorer?
Yeah, I was kind of a quiet kid. I'm the youngest of four boys, and I was always in the backyard, always tinkering with things, always exploring, catching bugs or box turtles or whatever. My family comes from, I would say, a very blue-collar background. My father was a carpenter. No one in the family had gone to college. We didn't have books around the house. I didn't know anyone who went to college except for my teachers, and I certainly didn't know a scientist. And we grew up on the coast of New Jersey, down near Atlantic City, where there's essentially sand and mud. That's the geology there. So in second grade, a woman brought in a box of rocks and minerals and fossils into my Cub Scout meeting. I literally didn't know these things were in the world.
Wow.
And it excited me terribly. And I must have gotten a hold of the Golden Guide to Geology or Paleontology, because shortly after I wrote an essay in school about igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary rocks, and I wrote that sedimentary rocks are the best kinds of rocks because you can find fossils in them. And now that I have a PhD in geology, I can confirm they are the best kind of rocks. So at that point, I wanted to be a paleontologist/geologist, had no idea how to get from A to B. And then at some point later, maybe in 7th or 8th grade, I decided, well, that's probably not for people like us. But I was pretty good, it turns out, at playing the drums. And I threw myself into that hard. And so that's pretty much what I did in high school, is I played the drums almost all my waking hours, got good at it. Then went to the only college I could afford to go to, which was Glassboro State College. And I started here for a brief time as a music major. Took what they call a gap year now. Back then, we just called it dropping out. And I went out to California, and I played drums for a year out there. I came back home, and I became the house drummer at the Golden Nugget Casino in Atlantic City, which was a great gig. I was on stage in the Opera House in front of 1,000 people, playing 8 shows a week.
What kind of music were you playing? What kind of
I played
band?
a Cole Porter review.
Oh.
And Cole Porter, you might not know the name, but he's written many of the songs that you know.
Yeah.
So
Anything Goes.
Anything Goes, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. April in Paris, all kinds of songs. So I'm up there, it's me, a bass player, 2 grand pianos, and the singers and dancers, all Broadway people, 1,000 people, 8 shows a week. It was fantastic. My music career was taking off. Probably could have went up and started playing in pit orchestras in Broadway, and then something happened. Carl Sagan's book Cosmos came out.
Oh boy.
And I read it, and I felt like he had written it just for me. And he was answering all these questions that I had about the universe, and then that kind of rekindled that spark I had when I was young for science and geology and paleontology. And then I decided, no, I have to find a way to become a scientist. So I got myself back into school. I came back to Glassboro State College. I wanted to major in geology, but there was no geology major. The closest I could get was geography.
Okay.
So I majored in geography, not knowing then after I got my bachelor's degree that you could switch majors in graduate school. I went to University of Maryland and got a master's in geography. By then I had figured it out.
Okay.
And I went to the University of Delaware and got a PhD in geology. And then through really a great stroke of fortune, I landed a job at Drexel University right out of the gate, became a research associate at the University of Pennsylvania, and with a team there, through a series of unbelievable coincidences, we hatched this idea to go to Egypt to look for the fabled lost dinosaurs of Egypt, and got that expedition funded from Ann Druyan, Carl Sagan's widow. And so it was my first year as a professor. We had been to Egypt. We didn't find the lost dinosaurs of Egypt, which were 4 species that were found 100 years before, brought to Munich and destroyed in World War II. But in the course of looking, we found a new species of giant plant eater, which at the time was the world's second largest dinosaur. So in my first year as a professor, I'd co-discovered the world's second largest dinosaur. I got to name it. My first publication was in the journal Science, and the whole thing was documented in a 2-hour A&E documentary narrated by Matthew McConaughey.
Yes.
And so then that was the launch pad
I
from
mean,
there.
did that just blow your mind?
It did. Yeah, it really did.
I mean, what was it like? Because you were there for something different, and you end up discovering a new species. Tell me about, like, what were those moments like being on that team?
Well, it was a thrill. I mean, it was my first expedition. I had barely traveled at that point. And so all of a sudden, I'm in the distant and remote Bahariya oasis of Egypt for months, learning to speak Arabic, riding a camel, taking a Land Cruiser across the desert. It was amazing. And, and the thrill I had then, seeing those first, for me, dinosaur bones appear, is an abiding thrill that never, ever goes away. And so anytime now, it's been over 25 years, anytime I find a fossil in the ground, it's a thrill, because I know at that moment, I'm the first person to see that. I'm the first person to know that. And, and then I immediately go to, who are you? What were you doing? What led to your demise? How did you live? There's just so many questions. And the connection between, yourself and the ancient past that I feel at those moments is really something that we hope to give to everybody when they visit here, because there's really nothing quite like it.
Yeah. So you traveled all over the world, not just Egypt. You've been to China. You've been all over. Now, you've done that as a geologist and as a paleontologist and a speaker. Where haven't you been that you would want to go? What part of the world do you feel like maybe untapped, or you would love to explore and think that maybe hasn't really been explored by humans enough?
There are a lot of places that I would like to explore scientifically that are politically unstable and not really safe to get to. I would love to go to Libya. The deposits that I was working in Egypt run to the west through Libya and are better exposed there. I'm sure we could find loads of dinosaurs there, but it's just not a safe place to go. And granted, I've gone to some places that are not like super safe, but a place like that is like off the charts not safe.
Yeah.
Afghanistan has incredible geology.
Wow.
I would love to go there, but that's probably not in the cards right now. And so, one thing though, the world is much freer and much more open than it was, 50 years ago or 100 years ago. It's part of why we're seeing the expansion of the number of known dinosaur species. Part of it's that, part of it that there's just more people in the world, and a tiny percentage of those people are going to be paleontologists.
Right.
So we have more boots on the ground, more eyes on the rocks now than ever. If you go back to the early 20th century, there was a new species of dinosaur discovered and published about once a year.
Wow.
By 1970, it was a half a dozen a year. Now it's about once a week.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize
Because
that.
there are just so many people going to so many places now. So as the world becomes freer, as travel becomes more accessible, we're just finding more and more. And what we can see, we're in the steep part of the discovery curve. The end is nowhere near in sight. So people often ask me, how many dinosaur species were there? We have no idea, but millions. And we have found maybe 2,000.
Wow.
So
there's just so much more.
I don't think we found 1% of the dinosaur species that are out there. And there are some that we will never find, because think about today's world, how we have alpine animals like mountain goats and bighorn sheep. If there were the dinosaur equivalents of those, we'll never find them, because mountains erode. We find species that are preferentially preserved in lowland areas, because that's where the sediment accumulates and you have to be buried quickly to become a fossil. So mountains, which are erosional, must have had dinosaurs, probably specialized dinosaurs, but we're never going to find that fauna.
No. Wow.
There's also, at the time that the dinosaurs were alive, Antarctica was already at the South Pole. It's been there for a long time, but the world was so warm that it wasn't glaciated. It was a boreal forest, but it was a forest that got 6 months of darkness.
Wow.
We don't have a place like that in the world today.
No.
So you asked me where would I go if I could go anywhere? I would go to unglaciated Antarctica to see what was living in the dark polar forest during the Cretaceous period.
Wow. And as our planet changes, as the Earth warms, do you think we'll discover more as the ice melts and things are becoming more revealed?
It is happening, that, and it's very unfortunate that that's happening. But as ice melts in places like Greenland and in Antarctica, it does provide more access to the rocks, and we are starting to see an uptick in discoveries in Antarctica. I would very much prefer that the ice stay where it is,
Yes.
and we could do without those dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But that is happening as the planet warms.
So let's get into the TED Talk a bit. How did you end up getting invited to speak at TED?
Well, you don't really apply to give a TED Talk. It's kind of just a bolt from the blue.
Uh-huh.
And I got an email inviting me to be a TED speaker. I almost didn't open it. I almost thought it was spam.
Wow.
Because it was very slickly formatted. And then I opened it and I was like, is this really for me? Is this really a TED Talk invitation? And I had read it like 3 times before I had convinced myself that, yes, I was being invited to give a TED Talk. Because I was a big fan of TED at that point.
Yeah.
So it was quite an honor and a thrill to be invited. And then, the next thought is, oh crap, I have to give a TED Talk. Which is a process, right? Giving it, at that point, I'd been a professor. I'd given thousands of talks. But there isn't anything else like giving a TED Talk. That's the World Series of public speaking. And, you get up on that stage and there's 1,600 people in the room and eventually millions and millions watching out there on the internet. And, I got up there on the stage and I look out there and there's Bill and Melinda Gates. There's Goldie Hawn over there. There's Sergey Brin over there. I look over there, there's Harrison Ford. I look over there, there's Cher.
Wow.
Right? And so I just I took a breath and I took a moment and I said in my head, expletive it. I'm the professor, this is my classroom. I'm just gonna do my thing.
Yeah.
And I started my talk and I had rehearsed a lot.
Yes.
Back from my musician days, I'm an incessant practicer, always have been. So I didn't say a word in that talk that was not on my script. It's a 16-minute talk, and I had every word memorized. But you have to get to what we call, my friend Tim Urban, who's also a TED speaker, talks about happy birthday memorized, which is that you're never, ever going to forget the words to happy birthday, right? You could be at a kid's party, and there's cake flying, and there's a kid hanging on your leg and all, but you're not going to mess up the words to happy birthday.
Right.
You have to have your talk memorized to the point where you get past, oh, what's the next word? You get back to thinking about the meaning of the words while you're saying them.
Yes.
And so I had gotten the talk to that point. So when I was speaking out there, I wasn't thinking about what's my next line.
No.
I was thinking about the content. I was thinking about the meaning that I wanted to convey to the audience. And, midway through the talk, I have like this little meta narration, like, hey, I'm giving a TED Talk and it's going pretty well. And there's Cher. And then,
so you had that moment where you could enjoy it and take it in and kind of understand and feel the audience's reaction of
I
it.
did, yeah. I'd say about a third of the way in, I felt like, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
I'm in the zone here.
Yeah.
And then I finish. Everybody stands up. TED speakers kind of like keep track of this. Everybody stands up except one guy.
Okay.
I look over there, and Harrison Ford is sitting down, and I kind of lock eyes with him, and he slaps his thighs, and he stands up.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
And then I come down off the stage, and then Cher pops out of her seat and gives me a flying hug.
Wow.
So now I've just given a TED Talk, and I'm holding Cher off the ground, and I'm just thinking, like, what the hell has happened to me?
What just happened?
Yeah.
Harrison Ford, that's pretty cool.
And then later on, that night I had a beer with him at the hotel bar.
Wow.
And I found out that he's just kind of super slow-mo guy. He's just like, he goes to scratch his nose, and it's like this. And you ask him a question, and there's 8 seconds of silence, and he says, yep.
Huh. So that's what took him a minute to stand.
I guess, yeah.
How about that? That's incredible. What an incredible story. So let's talk a little bit about how you came to form your talk. What really drove it, and how you ended up explaining, dinosaurs to the future, really.
Yeah. So they invited me there to the TED conference to talk about Dreadnoughtus, this giant dinosaur that I had previously discovered. But honestly, I didn't think that was enough. I didn't think that just talking about some big dumb dinosaur that I dug up in a desert somewhere was enough, because what have we learned from that? How does that help humanity? And so what I tried to do in that talk, which is then what I tried to do in the book, which is then what we try to do in the museum, is to use the lens of deep time to contextualize this present moment in time in which we find ourselves, to then hopefully plot a better course into the future based on what we can learn from deep time. And that's really the work of my life. And that's, in a way, this book grew out of my TED Talk, and this museum is kind of a giant physical version of this book. And that's been my goal all along, is to use the Earth's deep past to help us, plot a better course into the future, to help us become better ancestors. Because right now, we're not being the best ancestors, and our posterity is going to indict us for this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
For the world that we are leaving them, and we have a choice in this, and we could change things right now to make the world for our children and grandchildren and their grandchildren so much better than it might be. And just like if you go back at any point in time, there are an infinite number of futures that you could have, and we happen to get the one that led to us. Well, those people that are going to live in our future, there's also an infinite number of futures that they could experience, and we need to help them. We need to help them have the future that is good for them, so that they can live the kinds of lives that we have enjoyed, and have the kind of natural world that surrounds us, and to be able to have a good economy and good jobs and a clean environment. And that's all on us right now. They don't have a vote in this, right? No. They don't have agency. They haven't been born yet.
Right.
And so that's what I want to do with fossils, with deep time, with dinosaurs, is, because I think, like everyone, even us paleontologists, we're more interested in the future than we are the past. But we don't have access to the future, do we? Nobody remembers the future. Nobody can do experiments in the future. All we have is the past. It was Winston Churchill who said, the further back you look, the further ahead you can see. And so that's what we have. The present is nothing, right? The sentence I'm speaking now is already in your past.
Right.
So past is all we have. It's all we're ever going to have. And we need to use the past to create that future for the people that aren't born yet.
Okay, so tell me what can your average person do?
Everybody can do so much. Collectively, we can do the most, of course. So, the most powerful force that you have at your disposal is to vote, and to vote for responsible leaders who are thinking about the future of our planet. Whoever they might be, whatever party they might belong to, serious politicians have to take the Earth's existential crises seriously. These are existential crises. What could be more serious than the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis? What you can do as an individual, say at home, there are lots of things. Try to electrify your home as best you can. That usually means putting in a heat pump for your heating and cooling. Now, it's a decision, like if you already have a gas burner in your house and it's new, do you want to throw away a piece of new equipment? Maybe not. But when you get the chance, put in a heat pump. And if your home is all electric, what that does is you are now as green as the power grid. In New Jersey right now, 43% of the electricity is generated from renewable sources. So if you had nothing other than an all-electric house, all of a sudden you're 43% green. The governor's energy master plan takes that to 100% by 2050. So if you just did that one thing, make an all-electric house, by 2050, or maybe even earlier, your house will be carbon net zero, which is amazing, right? Yeah. That's something on the climate crisis side. On the biodiversity crisis side, make a little room for nature, right? Be more gentle with your yard and with the creatures that live in it. So, you don't need Roundup on your yard. That stuff is poison. Yep. Sorry. You don't need to fertilize your grass. There's fertilizer that's natural. You don't need insecticides. Those are your little buddies, right? Right now we have an insect apocalypse that's happening on the planet. We're losing 1% to 2% of insect populations globally per year. If the insects perish, we perish. We cannot live without insects. We cannot do it. most of our food comes through insects in one way or another. And one thing that you can do is just like leave a little patch of your yard natural. Mow it like maybe every 3 years, and that'll give a lot of habitat for small animals, for insects. You'll see the variety of birds in your yard increase. People that do this see about a 30% increase in the variety of birds. If you want to see more fireflies in the summer, if you want to see more butterflies in the summer, leave the leaves in your yard. Yeah. That's where they need that habitat for their eggs, and the birds need those resources to feed upon in the spring.
Right.
So you can actually do good by being lazy.
I was just going to say, I mean, how many people would love to not rake leaves?
Exactly, leave the leaves. And guess what? Those leaves will all break down in the spring, I promise you. You won't have leaves in your yard in the summer. Mm-hmm. And the carbon and other nutrients in those leaves, that's the natural fertilizer that your lawn needs. You don't have to go and buy bags of fertilizer. It falls from the trees every fall.
Yeah. Good advice. I also think composting would be a good thing for people to do more often.
Composting. There's so many things that you can do. And actually, if you come here, we have our Act Now kiosk, and you can find a list of things that you can do when you are at home. And maybe you don't have a yard, but there's other things that you can do as well. And any one person has a limited ability, but small changes do add up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's organizations you can get involved in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Who would you invite to dinner? An influencer or someone you admire most? If you could just ask one person, who would it be?
Living or dead?
Either. And why?
Well, my perfect dinner party is probably Carl Sagan, who I met just briefly in graduate school, Charles Darwin, Meriwether Lewis, the all-time explorer, and Mary Anning, who was an incredible fossil collector on the south coast of England in the 19th century.
Wow.
These are all people that I greatly admire and who I've learned so much from, and I just like to be in their presence and hear what they talk about.
Any drummers on that list or musicians?
Well, my all-time drumming hero is Buddy Rich.
Okay.
He passed in the 90s, but I actually got to meet him when I was in high school.
Wow.
He played at a venue in Somers Point, New Jersey. I stayed behind, and he had a reputation for being terribly surly and really mean to the members of his band, and he would cut a song and fire band members on the stage. He was kind of horrible. But apparently he was nice to kids.
Okay.
So I met him afterwards, and I asked him about this part that he had played in his solo, and I kind of sang the part for him. And he got down on the floor, and he showed me how to play it.
Oh, wow.
Which was amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you still know how to play it?
I do, and I try
great.
to work that into drum solos when I can.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so let's talk about, we talked about your childhood a little bit. One day you would become a pioneer and receive an Explorers Club medal. What was that like?
It was surreal. I kind of had the same feeling as when I got invited to be a TED speaker. So the president of the Explorers Club calls me up, and he says, I want you to know you're going to be the next recipient of the Explorers Club medal, which is the highest honor in exploration. And at that point, my mind just starts reeling. And he talked for about another 10 minutes. I have no idea what he talked about after that. And I'm thinking to myself, it sounded like he said the Explorers Club medal. I really need to hear him say that again, but it's going to be really embarrassing to ask.
Yeah. Are you sure about this?
So we're about to hang up, and I said, so you said the Explorers Club medal, right? And he said, yeah. I'm like, okay.
Okay. I'll accept that.
Yeah. So this was in 2019, which happened to be the 50th anniversary of the first Apollo moon landing.
Oh, wow.
So all of the living Apollo astronauts were there. They were up on stage with me. I got to have lunch that day with them. My son, who was, 9 or 10 at the time, sat at the table with me. We sat with Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins and Fred Hayes from Apollo 13 sat next to him. And I kept leaning over to him saying, burn this moment into your memory so you remember it when you're 90 years old.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because these are the first human beings to ever set foot on another world.
That's incredible.
And when you think about it, they are the most famous people in history, right? I mean, do you know who the King of England was in, 1535?
I sure don't.
I don't. And a couple hundred years from now, people won't remember most of the American presidents or know exactly when they were, but everybody is going to know Neil Armstrong, aren't they?
Yeah.
In 1,000 years or 2,000 years, everybody's going to know Neil Armstrong. And so this is a unique group of people, and it was such a thrill to have met them all. Buzz Aldrin tweeted, "Here's my new friend Ken, he found a dinosaur."
Wow.
And to just, to receive the Explorers Club medal in front of thousands of people, it's a big black tie affair, is unbelievable. But then to have my childhood heroes, the Apollo astronauts, there at that moment was just an unbelievable thrill.
Did you get some good photos with them?
I did. I got great photos. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Was your son in the photos too at any point? Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fred Hayes was so kind to my son. He kept leaning over and joking with him the whole time.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And now Fred and I are we're Facebook friends, and I just love watching the adventures of Fred Hayes and his grandchildren.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I guess great grandchildren now. And this is a guy who came damn near to dying in space.
Yeah.
And here he is enjoying a
Life.
long, healthy life with his grandkids and great grandkids. It's really just so nice to see.
Yeah. Let's talk about Dreadnoughtus.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that expedition, what you were expecting, and what it was like to discover that dinosaur.
Yeah, so I went down to the bottom of South America to Patagonia near Tierra del Fuego, first in 2004. And this was coming off the heels of the work we had done in Egypt. And so in Egypt, we had discovered a dinosaur that we named Paralititan, which at the time was the world's second largest dinosaur. And finding the fifth or the sixth largest dinosaur, that would have been cool. Finding the second largest dinosaur kind of pissed me off. We were so close. Yeah. So I had thought that we would continue working in Egypt for a long time, and then 9/11 happened.
Ooh, okay.
And it became not so feasible to go there. It's okay now, but at the time there was actually...
There were some years in there where Egypt was a little shaky.
Yeah, and there was actually some terrorism in the oasis where we had been working just months before. So I started working out in Montana, Wyoming a little bit, did some work in China in the Gobi Desert, and then in the foothills of the Himalayas where we discovered ancient birds that filled about a 30 million year gap in the evolutionary history of birds.
Wow.
And those are really nice to work with because you can literally put these fossils in a shoebox and carry them home on the plane. It's easy. But stupidly, I have this passion for the really, really big dinosaurs, the sauropods, because they're just so fascinating and amazing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to find more. And I thought that this area in Patagonia, looking at the geological maps, looking at history, I thought it would have giant dinosaurs. I knew that nobody had worked within about 1,000 kilometers of there. I knew that the exposures of the rocks were, some of the best in the world. And so I got myself down there in 2004 on a very hard expedition. The site that I wanted to work was across this roaring glacial stream. There was no road or bridge to get to the other side. So we had to work by raft that year, and raft, hundreds of pounds of plaster and burlap and the other things that we need across.
By raft.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the one site that we found was at the top of a 1,000-foot mountain, and I was climbing that mountain 6-7 times a day.
So you were in the best shape of your life.
I really was. I come back from those expeditions ripped. And we had found some really big bones that year, but they were scrappy. I'm not sure I would collect them now.
Okay.
But when you're in an area, you don't want to come back with nothing, and so there's a lot of pressure to find something. And so we collected these bones, which means putting them in a plaster and burlap jacket, making them even heavier. And then the only way I had to get them out of the desert was I hired 2 gauchos and their teams of horses. And we would pad out these metal sleds with prairie grass, strap the dinosaur bones to them, and tow them out of the desert with horses that way.
Wow.
So I knew I had a good site, but I wasn't really going to have a productive site unless I could find a way to drive to the site. And everybody, even the locals, were telling me that's not possible. But on one of the last days of the field season, I got one of the Jeeps, And I drove way up the river to this like rickety wooden bridge that crossed the river, drove across the other side. Shouldn't have done this, but nobody knew where I was. You know, I would kill my grad students if they went out by themselves. But
Yeah.
and I'm picking my way through the Badlands. There was a place where you have to just put your wheels over this ledge and lock the brakes and bounce down the hill.
Oh, wow.
And hope you don't turn because you'll roll. But then, without anybody knowing where I was, at dinner time, I show up in camp with the Jeep, showing that we can drive
We
there.
can actually do this.
And,
Okay.
and then I'm wondering, like, can I get this Jeep back out? Because it's a rental.
Ooh.
But I did.
Okay.
And then the next year when we came back, I hired a gaucho with a broken down old front end loader, and we spent the first few days scraping a 15-kilometer long road to get into the site. And once we had that road, then we had a project.
Yeah.
And then that first day of that field season when we started prospecting, I found the femur of Dreadnoughtus.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
The first day.
the first day, yeah.
Talk me through that. How'd that happen?
Well, I first saw this maybe, T-saucer piece of bone exposed at the ground. You never just dig and hope to get lucky. You get yourself in the right geological circumstance, and then
Right.
you walk until you see things sticking out of the rock.
Just sticking out of the rock.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in a place like this, you don't even like bend over to check out every dinosaur bone that you find. I might nudge one with my foot to see if it's attached to anything else, because just an isolated piece isn't really going to help you. But there's so many, thousands and thousands. So I saw this little piece, and I wasn't, too excited at that point. But then we started uncovering it, and it's easy to uncover the things that are at the surface because the rocks are weathered. As you go down a little bit, not very far, it gets more like concrete, and you're using pickaxes. This is at a time when, this is 2005, I'm an assistant professor on the tenure track.
Oh, wow.
At this point. I have stupidly put all of my research time and all of my research money into this project. It has to pay off or I'm sunk. And so we uncover this giant femur. I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool.
This could work out for me.
And then we start digging some more. There's the tibia, there's the fibula, there's some vertebrae.
Wow.
And then I open up my GPS and I put in a point and I label it tenure.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's
Because
what it should be called,
that's
too.
when I knew it was going
You
to be
were good.
okay.
You were going to be all right.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you ended up something like 70% of this dinosaur?
Yeah, we found about 70% of the postcranial skeleton, which is by far the most complete of any giant dinosaur. We excavated 145 humongous bones of this creature. All told, we extracted 16 tons of fossils.
Wow.
And then got them back to my lab in the United States. It was actually too much material to work on. I had a 5-year loan, so we had to work fast. So I sent a third of the material to the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh. I sent a third of the material to the Academy of Natural Sciences, and I kept a third in my lab in Philadelphia. We worked that way for about 3 years, and then we reunited all the material in my lab, and then there it was. There was Dreadnoughtus all laid out in my lab. It was just an incredible sight. Those couple of years when it was all together and in my lab are just some of the best memories of my whole life. It was incredible.
And tell me about naming Dreadnoughtus.
Well, I think it's a grave responsibility, no pun intended, to name a dinosaur, because who am I to name a dinosaur? I was, at the time, my lineage were these little shrew-like mammals living in the hidden and forgotten recesses of the dinosaur world, hoping never to be noticed. And then, eventually some of us evolve into primates and humans, and a few of those turn into paleontologists. And now it's up to me to name this species, right? And so I've had the chance to name a few, and I try to think of a name that really honors the legacy of the creature, because this animal that existed long before humans, evolved and persisted for 1 million years or so under its own auspices and did incredible things that no other animal quite like it had done. So we had a snowstorm one day, and I couldn't go to work, and I sat home on the couch and wrote out a list of about 30 potential dinosaur names, and I hung it on the refrigerator. And for about 2 years, when people would come over, I'd give them the list, and I'd ask them to check the names that kind of resonated with them. And Dreadnoughtus was the runaway winner. And so Dreadnoughtus means dread, fear, nothing. So fears nothing.
Fears nothing.
Because in life, Dreadnoughtus, all fleshed out, would have weighed 65 tons.
Wow.
That's the mass of 13 African elephants. That's the mass of 9 T-Rex. That's about 10 tons heavier than a Boeing 737. So if you're the mass of 9 T-Rex, what have you to fear? Nobody's going to prey upon you, and so the name Dreadnoughtus fears nothing. Yeah,
it's a good choice.
Yeah, and the name really hit the Boston Globe, did a whole article just about the name. And then I knew it had really kind of entered the popular zeitgeist. This was during the Afghan war was still happening, and there was a story in the New York Times that had nothing to do with dinosaurs. It was about in Kabul, Afghanistan, they raised this giant flag for some reason, and in the story they said they raised a Dreadnoughtus-sized flag. And
So
I was
it became like,
wow, okay.
It's
in the zeitgeist now.
Yeah.
And then, it's been in lots of children's books. It's been on T-shirts and all kinds of things. It was in the Jurassic World Dominion movie,
Yes.
which was a thrill. Mattel made a 5-foot-long Dreadnoughtus toy.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's,
And then,
wow.
I was sitting at home minding my business watching the Winter Olympics, and there's a commercial with the snowboarder Shaun White and Dreadnoughtus.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's your pop culture now. Look at you.
Dreadnoughtus is pop culture. Yeah. There's a Dreadnoughtus beer also, which is also
I
another
heard about
life
this.
goal achieved.
Yes. Now, was this did you collaborate on some beer?
I did with a local brewery called Neck of the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And tell me about the beer. Is it good?
Well, actually, I got to sit with the brewmeister, which, how cool a title is that?
That is a cool
and
title.
He was giving me different flavors. Taste this, like the raw ingredients. What do you think of this? And so he kind of combined all the flavors that I liked into this beer, which was fantastic. Unfortunately, it was a short run of the beer.
Yeah.
But, the label and the artwork aside, it was the best beer I ever tasted.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about beer, I don't know if you know this, but we've been working a little bit with the brewing scientist Matt Farber, and we're going to be brewing beer with him. And he's going to be brewing beer from the Fossil Park Gardens.
Oh, that's great. I actually didn't know that.
You didn't know that. Well, he's doing that. He and his brewing assistant, Jake, they'll be brewing that.
Uh-huh.
And then we're working on a beer as well that's a coffee stout that we've taken coffee from this museum that we'll be using. So
love it.
We're hoping to come back and visit with you and have you try some beer with us.
Well, I like where this is going.
All right. Good. Let's talk a little bit. Let's shift. Let's talk about students. What kind of work? You've been a professor, a dean. You work here. You research. All sorts of involvement with students.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your work with students. However you want to chat about it.
Well, I've been really fortunate to have just a great group of grad students that have come through my labs, and happy to report that all of them who got PhDs are gainfully employed as professors now, and they're all doing research in various parts of paleontology. And then I've had so many great undergraduate students. When I was teaching in the classroom, I always taught big lecture courses. I would teach courses with 300 students. And still keep in touch with a bunch of them, and a lot of them, I taught a lot of pre-med students, and a lot of them are physicians now, and they'll stop in or drop me a line sometime, and they tell me that the evolution course that I used to teach for them, has been impactful in their medical practice. Which is great, and it should be, right? If you don't understand evolution, you really don't understand how biology works. You really don't understand how organisms work.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of teaching these future physicians all about evolution.
Have any of the students you've worked with gone on to, in paleontology, have gone on to discover things, or will? You think?
Yeah, for sure. One of my grad students, Elena Schrader, is one of the leaders now in a field called molecular paleontology. She has a professorship at North Carolina State University, and she is on the vanguard of this new area where we are demineralizing the bones of dinosaurs and other creatures and recovering soft tissues. We're recovering proteins and blood vessels and maybe blood cells, and there is no DNA. I'm not super hopeful about that because DNA is water soluble, and the oldest DNA recovered so far is about 1.5 million years, which is a long way from dinosaur time. but there's hereditary information in proteins. And so my hope is we get to the point, and we do this also in my lab on campus, I hope we get to the point where we are recovering dinosaur proteins, sequencing them, and are able to then develop family trees based on the proteins, which will give us a completely independent means to look at their phylogeny or their heredity, other than right now we just have the skeletons. But if we have the skeletons and the proteins, and those are telling us the same thing, then we can have a lot more confidence in what we were saying. Conversely, if they're telling us different things, well, that'll be very interesting, and we have to go back then and reevaluate our hypotheses based on skeletal material alone.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about Jurassic Park. Let's talk a little bit about movies. Let's have a little fun. What's your favorite movie incorporating dinosaurs or extinction or related topics? And you can say Jurassic World Dominion because obviously they included Dreadnoughtus, but maybe not. Let's skip that one. What else besides that one?
My favorite movies in general?
No, it has to be related to your work.
Yeah. Well, there haven't been a lot of movies with dinosaurs that are, like, dare I say, really good.
That's fair.
I do enjoy the Jurassic franchise. Paleontologically, it's, has its ups and downs, let's say. Of course, it was a lot of fun to see Dreadnoughtus in a Jurassic movie. That was a thrill.
Yeah.
So that's kind of got to be my favorite.
Sure.
I guess maybe more broadly in like the fieldwork genre, the Indiana Jones movies are
Sure.
great. I love those so much.
You got to meet Harrison Ford,
Have a beer with Harrison Ford.
That's incredible.
So that was amazing.
Yeah.
So I love those movies. And I gravitate towards films that are in natural settings, right? I love Lord of the Rings because it's in part because it's so outdoors, right? And I love being immersed in those kind of settings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
World building.
Yeah, world building.
I'm going to put a couple out there. I don't know if you've seen any, but Idiocracy. Do you know this film?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. That movie is scarily plausible.
Right?
Yeah.
It feels like every year we're getting closer to it.
I would put in that same category Don't Look Up. Did you see that?
Yep.
And also terrifying because you could see it happening.
Yes.
And it kind of is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also on my list. Ice Age. Do you know that one?
Yeah, that makes some pretty huge paleontological blunders that are
Some leaps.
Yeah, the conflate time periods, and never mind all the talking animals. I can live with that. But,
right.
That one doesn't really work for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair. Okay. So we talked a little bit about since Ice Age. I just brought it up. Woolly mammoths. You showed me a tooth earlier. Maybe we could go and revisit that again. But it brings me to another question. So you've served on the Scientific Advisory Board of Colossal Biotechnology.
Serve currently.
Serve.
Yeah.
Since 2022, you've served.
Okay.
You're currently on the board. Okay, so this is a company that's focused on de-extinction. I find this really fascinating. Gene editing, restoring Earth to a healthier state. Can you break this down for a layman?
Sure. Yeah, I'm super excited about the work that Colossal is doing. I feel very privileged to be part of it. When I'm there, I feel like I'm in a movie. It's incredible, the laboratories that they have. There's some misconceptions that go along with it as well. One is people kind of conflate this with Jurassic Park, right, and bringing back dinosaurs. That's not what's happening here. And so the creatures that they are working to de-extinct right now are the woolly mammoth, the dire wolf, the dodo, and the thylacine, also known as the marsupial wolf. These are creatures that have lived in our near past, right? These are creatures that humans forced into extinction. People think of mammoths and dinosaurs as sort of the same thing. The last population of mammoths went extinct 3,300 years ago in an island off the coast of Siberia. 3,300 years ago is a world that has written stories. It's a world that has pyramids. It's a world that has beer. We're back to beer.
Yeah.
that's this world.
Yeah.
Right? They
Yeah.
belong in this world. They had a keystone position in that ecosystem. Right? Just like the marsupial wolf, they were alive until the 1930s when the government of Australia put a bounty on their heads, and Australians went out and shot every single one of them.
Wow.
There are films of this animal. They live in this world.
Films of this animal.
There are trees that are older than when they went extinct. So they have a place in this world, and so I think if we broke it, we bought it, right? And I think we have a moral obligation, if we can, to try to create really what are ecological proxies for these species. So right now what is happening is not straight up genetic cloning. I think maybe we will get there someday, but this is synthetic biology or genetic engineering, where we can take the parts of the genome that code for the most characteristic, the most phenotypical parts of the animal, and implant those into a close relative and then express those traits. So in the mammoth, so the giant size, the long tusks, the cold tolerance, the long shaggy red hair. And really what you want to do is make as few gene replacements as possible, so that you don't have unintended consequences with any of those gene replacements.
Right.
So that will create an ecological proxy for those organisms in the ecosystem. Eventually we might get to cloning actual ancient material, so there's a direct line of heredity that goes back. Now, what I would say with Colossal, the thing I'm most excited about, which probably doesn't get enough attention, is the work they're doing in modern conservation.
Let's talk about it.
And so the tools that they are developing are incredibly powerful for keeping organisms that are on the brink of extinction right now from toppling over the edge into oblivion. For example, the northern quoll in Australia, this tiny little marsupial, probably going to go extinct because it eats the invasive cane toad, which is poisonous. And they don't know not to eat the cane toad. It looks like a good snack to them.
Wow.
With a single genetic replacement, Colossal has made the northern quoll immune to cane toad poison.
Okay.
And so this will probably save that species from extinction. And if they do nothing else except save one species from extinction, to me, that's worth it. The red wolf, which you might not have heard of, is a subspecies of wolf. They only live in North Carolina. There's only about 20 of them left. You can imagine when you interbreed sexually, right? You leave behind half your genes in every offspring. So that gene pool shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and gets really tight, and that's not good for the health of a population, right? It makes them really vulnerable to disease and malformities and all kinds of things. So what they have found is that for millennia, red wolves have been breeding with coyotes. So they're getting genomes from coyotes, taking the red wolf genes out and doing a genetic rescue, building a more robust genetic pool for the red wolves, and they intend to grow a population of more genetically diverse red wolves and release them in Louisiana.
Wow. So hopefully
possibly saving this species from extinction. They have created an mRNA vaccine for the Asian elephant, and there's a terrible disease right now called the elephant endothelial herpes virus, which is killing something like half of baby Asian elephants. And with this one vaccine that they've created, they're making them immune from that terrible virus.
Wow.
Maybe saving more elephants than all of elephant conservation previously. And so I'm really excited about the tools that they are developing that are not just going to help de-extinct animals, but I think more importantly, to save things that are currently on the edge.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good story. I like that story.
Yeah, and so I'm happy to be part of that. And
Yeah.
Colossal, I should mention, has been a great friend and sponsor of the museum.
Great.
They sponsored our 6th extinction wall, which is both beautiful and heartbreaking.
Yes.
And they have also sponsored schools from underprivileged communities to come here. And so we will have about 50 schools visiting the museum over the next year that might not have been able to come here if it weren't for the generosity of Colossal.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. So there are a lot of dinosaur museums and natural history museums. What makes this particular place so special to geological history and just in general? This, not only this museum, but this actual space on Earth?
Yeah. Well, three things. I'll start with the architecture. It's an astoundingly beautiful building. The first thing I said to the architects was no fossil fuels at the fossil park.
I love that.
And so we are a carbon net zero facility. We achieve that by having 72 250-foot geothermal wells under the parking lot. And right now we have a power purchase agreement for renewable electricity. Soon we will have our own photovoltaic field on the property, and we'll be not only carbon net zero, but carbon negative as well. We'll be sending clean energy back to the grid.
Okay.
That's first. Second is that we are a very time and place-based museum, and so we are about this place as it existed 66 million years ago. And in the last 18 years, we have excavated over 100,000 fossils, representing over 100 extinct species from the quarry that's 25 yards from us right now. They're on display right here, so people can come here. And when you think of dinosaurs, you might think of Montana or Wyoming or Patagonia, but they were all right here on the East Coast. We had, this amazing history just like everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And you can come and you can experience that right here. And the third thing is, I like to say this is a dinosaur museum that's more about the future than the past. And, the past is very interesting, but the past tells us things, and it tells us things about the future. And so people come here and they enjoy these amazing dinosaur recreations that are behind us, and they see all the fossils that we have collected. But all that is in the service of contextualizing our place in time right now, where we stand in Earth history, the issues, the challenges that we face, and how we can plot a better course forward. So I think of the main exhibits loop as a 3-act play. And these first two galleries are kind of like the good old days, right? This is Act 1, the dinosaur age of yore, that's, everything's going pretty well. And then Act 2, calamity, right? An asteroid hits, wipes out the dinosaurs and 75% of species on the planet. Fast forward that to the biodiversity crisis today, the climate crisis today. That's the bottom of Act 2, but we can't leave you there, right? Of course, we have to have redemption. Mm-hmm. And you go into the Hope Gallery, and you learn that there is hope to build a better world, to solve these problems, that all the solutions that we need are right here. We just have to choose them. And we give you agency. So you come in, you get your Explorer key, you can use that to interact with various parts of the museum, but at the end of this gallery loop, you can tap into the Act Now kiosk. You can join with local, national, and global organizations. You can find an event to attend. You can get a reading list or a viewing list, or you can find a long list of things that you can do when you're away from the museum. You don't have to remember your choices. They get sent to your own private webpage that's built for you. You get an email reminder that it's there, and you're all set up to make positive change in the world before you walk out the doors of the museum. And that's why I say this is a dinosaur museum that's more about the future than the past.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can actually leave here with the hope and with some ways to take action and ways to contribute to the future.
Absolutely. And that agency is what turns despair into true hope, right? Like hope without action is really despair. You're just hoping like the Coast Guard comes or something, right?
Right.
But if you have agency, that's different.
Right. There's something you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. So would you say that's really the mission here?
It is. Our motto here is discover the past, protect the future.
Yeah.
And the basic thesis of everything that we do here is that people love what they know and people protect what they love.
Yeah.
And you're not going to fall in love with this earth if you don't get to know it.
That's
if you
right.
don't get outside, get your hands dirty, walk on the nature trails, see the amazing past that we've had. And once you fall in love with this amazing, wondrous planet that we're so fortunate to occupy, well, then maybe you'll join together with others to help protect it. That's our hope.
Yeah, I find that too. This is like a sidebar, but like as a child, I was similar. I was out playing in the dirt, in the woods, running around, salamanders, bugs, you name it. And today, when I see people with a different mindset and they want to kill bugs and they want to stomp on things, it drives me crazy.
People are afraid of nature.
Yeah.
I see the poison mosquito companies show up at our neighbor's yard, just poisoning the landscape. Kids don't get outside as much as they used to. I have a teenage son, and he loves nature, but it's hard to pry him away from the screen, like everybody, like me sometimes.
Sure.
So people don't have the same connection to the natural world as we used to.
Yeah.
And, and then, if you don't know it, you won't love it. you might not protect it. And so we're trying to help reverse that trend.
Yeah. One thing that we do as a family is we like to travel to natural parks and things like that, national parks, so that they can get out and they have no choice but get rid of that screen, get out and explore, and just get to know and love the land.
Yeah, we do too. We're big hikers. Every vacation we take is a hiking vacation, and my teenage son craves that now. He wants to go hiking.
Right.
He'll say, "Let's go hiking today," and so that's just always part of our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask some rapid fire things. What is the best part of Jurassic Park, and why is it Laura Dern?
Check.
Check. Okay. If dinosaurs came back today, which species would immediately become an influencer?
Well, probably a velociraptor. I think it's got some panache and probably pretty vocal, being a large bird-like dinosaur.
It's pretty flashy, too.
Flashy for sure. Yeah. Can put the claws out when it wants to.
Which dinosaur would find it convenient that the museum is right by a Lowe's?
Well, probably Hadrosaurus. They were big nest builders, so everything they need is probably right there at
It's
Lowe's.
right there at Lowe's.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not getting a sponsorship from Lowe's, by the way.
I know.
But we're open to it.
That's a good point. Okay, so we're going to play just a little game for fun. I'm going to show you some dinosaur names and see if you can pronounce them. I'm sure you can, but let's see how it goes. Help us pronounce it.
Uranosaurus.
Confident with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Parasaurolophus.
That's pretty good.
Gallimimus.
And do you know what all these are?
Yeah. Psittacosaurus.
Psittacosaurus.
Therizinosaurus. Paralititan stromeri. I named that dinosaur.
I knew you did.
I don't have my glasses. Is that Mick Jagger?
No? It's T-Rex. The band T-Rex. Are you a fan of theirs?
No.
That's okay.
I'm sure they're great, but I haven't really listened.
Oh.
I didn't even listen to contemporary music when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I listened to music like 30 years before me.
You're going to have to listen to T-Rex. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
All right. She's a jazz drummer.
Oh.
That's it. That's it on that.
I'm terrible with pop culture.
I'm seeing that. But you're part of it, so I think that you've got some
Ironically.
homework assignments
Yeah,
here.
probably.
You're
No,
gonna leave
I
here
never.
with some...
If I play Trivial Pursuit or something, like I can kick butt in certain categories, and I don't know any of the pop culture stuff.
What game are you good at? Like if you were going to have a game night with board games,
This is
and
too
you
nerdy to speak in public.
tell me, I can't wait.
Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit.
So you do trivia, but it has to be Lord of the Rings specific.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm a Catan fan.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm good with strategy, and that's like a game of strategy.
Yeah, I used to play that a long time ago. It's been a while.
Yeah. Okay, so we're sitting here at the Edelman Fossil Park Museum. So I want to talk a little bit about you're an alum of Glassboro State, now Rowan University, and we're at the Edelman Fossil Park Museum of Rowan University. So let's talk a little bit about some fellow alums of yours, Rick and Jean Edelman.
Yeah.
Tell me about them and their impact here.
Well, huge, obviously. We actually overlapped by a year or two.
Really?
Yeah, I was as I was a freshman. I think Rick was a senior.
Okay.
But we didn't know each other at the time. But lovely people. It's been such a joy getting to know them and having them as friends and collaborators on this. Both just really bright, very creative, given me great support, great advice and ideas. And so It's been fun. It's been really fun to have them here. I wish they were a little closer so they could visit more often.
Yeah, but they have been out here. They've done some digging.
Absolutely, yeah. Rick in particular loves to get his hands dirty in the quarry, and just turns into a little kid when he's excavating fossils out there.
Yeah.
And also we have this amazing paleontology themed playground with this 45-foot pterosaur, and you can climb up in the belly. And as soon as we set that up, he was right up in the belly, and so
that's great.
Yeah, it's great fun having them. Obviously, what they've done is monumental. They made this place possible. And, the thing about museums is they hang around for a long time, right? There are museums in Europe that are 1,000 years old. And so this place might be here in 200 years or 500 years. And can you imagine all the good that a museum does over 500 years? And so the spark that they lit with their amazing contribution is something that's going to burn bright for long after people forget our names, but a place like this can be here doing good in the world for almost ever.
Yeah, they do a lot of good. They, I know they have a big finance career, but they also just support the arts and the sciences, and obviously the planetarium. So it is really nice to see.
And they're fun people to be with, too. Rick is really funny. He knows an annoying number of drummer jokes, which he really has. It's a little disturbing how quickly he can pull out the drummer jokes. And then Jean is just so lovely. Jean just wants to give the world a hug.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today for Rowan on Paleontology. I'm your host, Karen Holloway, and a big special thank you to Dr. Kenneth Lacovara. We'll see you next time.